Hi, everyone. I'm Mrs. Akery. I'm a language arts teacher at Academic Magnet High School, and today I have the pleasure of talking to June Hur. She is a New York Times bestselling author of Korean historical fiction for young adults, including The Silence of Bones and A Crane Among Wolves. She considers her books to be love letters to Korean history and opportunities to explore her roots. We get an opportunity to talk to her about the connection between creativity and research. Her forthcoming novel, Behind Five Willows, is inspired by Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. June, I'm very excited to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Yeah, thank you. Before we talk about research and its connection to your creative work, can you talk to us about what June was like as a high schooler?
Oh, okay. So I have my stories a bit all over the place, like country-wise, because I started high school in Canada. I was in grade 9, ordinary high school student. During that time, I had no idea what I wanted to do with the future. All I knew was that I just loved writing Jane Austen fan fiction, like Pride and Prejudice fan fiction. And then one day my dad was like, "We're moving back to Korea." And I was just like, "What?" Like I didn't know how to speak Korean that well. I wasn't literate in Korean. And so I was like, "Okay, if we're going back to Korea, I hope you're putting us in like an international school where the studying is in English." And they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna put you in an international school." We all moved to Korea, me, my two siblings, and my parents. And then they're like, "Yep, you're going to a public school. Everything's gonna be in Korean. You're gonna study in Korean. The
Oh my
teacher's gonna talk in
goodness.
Korean. English exams are gonna be like the questions are gonna be in Korean." And so I remembered struggling so much in high school. And I remember because of the language barrier and not really doing well in school, I was just like I remember feeling very insecure and feeling very scared for my future because I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I was good at. All I knew was that I loved writing. And so school in Korea would begin at like 8 a.m. and end at 11 p.m. And so I'd be in school all day long. And to cope with the circumstance I was in, I would just write. I would write fiction and I'd kind of escape into my own imaginary world. And then that's kind of where I think I found kind of like my confidence in storytelling, just by like, yeah, like high school was my storytelling boot camp basically. So yeah, like there was a lot of insecurity, but I think storytelling really helped me find my own voice. And it reminded me, like, June, you're not dumb. Like, you have a mind of your own. You have opinions and thoughts, even though you can't articulate it in Korean, like, your thoughts are still valid. And so I think that's kind of, that was me, basically, a snapshot of June in high school.
Mhm. I appreciate that. I think about some of our students who our school can be academically competitive, where
Hmm.
I think we're in the top 10 in the United States. Yeah,
Wow.
so our kids are definitely gifted and talented academically for sure. Um, but some of what you said made me think of, I don't know, speaks so much to you that you were able to encourage yourself. Like you were able to kind of
Hmm.
root yourself on and be like, hey, you know what? I'm good at something and I'm going to keep
Hmm.
pursuing that. That's so encouraging and motivating, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so talking about research and creativity, what happens? Like, do you have the idea first, or is it the research rabbit hole that you fall into and then the inspiration comes from there?
Mm. So I actually started off by writing British history. And with British history, I think it was like the characters and the plot first, but that changed radically once I fell in love with Korean history. So when I started so I spent 10 years writing British historicals, and then when I couldn't get published, I kind of switched gears and I was like, you know what, let's like turn a fresh page, start a new chapter in my writing journey and look into Korean history since I'm Korean. And I realized I know so little about Korea's past. So I was just like, well, let's do a bit of reading. And I did a bit of light research, and I remember like falling so deeply in love. I never felt like this before. Like I remember my hands were like shaking and my heart was like beating so fast. And it's so weird when you hear this. It's like, oh yeah, she was just researching, but why is she like sweating and like her heart, having heart palpitations? And I just but remember like wanting to go up to a rooftop and like scream like, "Oh my gosh, like this research I'm doing is so amazing. Like I need you all to like learn a bit more about what I'm discovering." So ever since then, history ended up becoming my primary source of inspiration. So like I'd be reading into like a scholarly text, and if there's something that I'm reading about, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never knew this happened in Korea. I kind of like dog ear it mentally. And then when it's time for me to send my publisher a book proposal, I'd be like, this is the history I need this to be the center of the story, this historical event. And then based on the historical event, I'll start brainstorming, being like, what kind of plot can I write about? What kind of characters would best highlight this historical period? So I'd say the research comes first, and then the plot idea and the characters come second for me.
Okay, so I love kind of the way you framed it was almost research is your muse a little bit. Does
Yes,
that,
yes.
yes? Okay. I love that. Um, so I think you do specialize in a particular period of Korean history. Is
hmm
that correct?
Yes.
Would that be the Chosun
Yes,
dynasty?
the
That
Joseon Dynasty. Yeah,
okay.
it's a very long period. Like even I get the dates off. It's like the mid like 1300s all the way to like 1910. Around then is like the Joseon Dynasty.
Okay. Was there a particular event? I'm thinking back to maybe when
hmm
you first made this switch over to Korean historicals. Was there a particular event that was the big spark? Was the light bulb for you where you're
Yes.
like, this is it, like I'm making this jump?
hmm so for me, I remember when I was like a teenager, I'd visit I lived in Korea and I'd also visit because my parents ended up staying there. So I'd go back to Korea every few years to see my parents, and I always remember thinking like, why are there so many churches like crosses in Korea? And it was just very strange to me. So then when I was starting to research into Korean history, it was actually about the first encounter between Koreans and Catholicism. And I found that so fascinating because Korea, like when we think of like Christianity, like Catholicism back then, we think a lot about like colonization. But in Korea, Korea was one of the rare cases where Christianity spread in a very homegrown way, where there was much more agency. People didn't have to spread it, but they did. And so I just found that kind of yeah, found that interesting. And because I'm of Christian background, like I just didn't know my history as a Korean and as a Christian. So I found that very interesting. And I think I realized that Korean history is much more, that was when the first kind of like realization that history is much more personal to me than I realized kind of dawned. So that was like the first um, I guess the first spark for me.
Wow. Yeah, that was for your book, The Silence of Bones,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Yeah, I remember there's a particular moment in there where there's a certain important woman that comes forward, and I remember having my own moment of being like, this is crazy. Like
Yeah,
this
I
is
know.
so interesting that this happened in Korean history.
hmm
And just like you said, how Christianity kind of like spread and unfolded in a particularly unique way
hmm
compared to other countries. Um, so when you do research, do you have kind of like a process? Do you have a system that you use? Like, what does it look like for you when you're conducting your research for a project?
So it's always like an evolving process because I'm learning myself. I think it when I first began, it was very messy. Like I'd write on notebooks, like in physical notebooks, but I also document it on Word docs. I'd be like research dash dash like calendars in East Asia, and then research dash dash society, and then also in notebooks I'd be like this happened and this happened. And so I remember just being like, oh my gosh, like I remember this one particular historical fact that I really want to include in my book, but like I don't know where I put it. So from that chaos I created like my own kind of system I follow by, which is so first I'll always start with like a history 101 kind of. So I will like, let's for example, when I was interested in like the tyrant King Yeonsangun, which is like one of Korea's worst king. I would first do like a very broad, uh, it's like almost like reading over Wikipedia, but just like a longer like a book that's like a Wikipedia. So like a very generalized history. So just I just get the gist of the history that I want to focus on. And then from there, like I'll loosely create a plot and characters. Because I could end up, because on the flip side, I could do like intense research for like 10 years and then realize this is the story I want to write about, but none of the research I did actually matters now because it's like disjointed. So what I do is I like to do a brief research, generalize, get the idea of the world, create a draft of the story. And then from there, from the draft, I'll realize, like, you know what, I need to research more to this. Like, for example, the lives of women, for example, or like the political climate, like more details about the political climate of the time. And so the story that I end up drafting almost creates like is like a guidebook for what kind of deeper research I need to do. And then, so for the next several months, I'll just research, and then kind of flesh out the story or rewrite the entire story. Because I remember when with the Akery Among Wolves, which is based on the era of King Sun, I remember like I plotted it. So it's like, you know what, like it's the coup leaders overthrow the king, and like these men are like glorious, and they like save the country. But then when I did research, I'm like, oh, the coup leaders were no better than the king. And so I
Mm.
had to revise a lot of the story as well. So yeah, it's like it's messy, but that's kind of my system. And now I use something called a program called Scrivener. And Scrivener has a great kind of program where I could store all my, like, I could organize my story on the program, but I could also have like files for all my research notes and categorize it into, like, for example, names people had back then. So it'll be like one folder of all the name ideas, and then details about the king will be like another folder. And so I'll kind of, yeah, categorize everything so that I could find it whenever I need to when I'm writing.
What I really appreciate about your process and what you explained is that sometimes you have to go back because of
Yes.
something new that you found out. I think part of the research process for students, which can be a little frustrating, is when
Hmm.
you kind of hit a wall and realize, oh my gosh, I have to revise, or oh my gosh, I have to completely change my research question, or that kind of thing. So it sounds like it's a natural part of the process. Does
Yep.
that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally natural. Yeah.
When you let's say you're feeling inspired and you
Hmm.
maybe don't have like Scrivener access to Scrivener right away. How
Hmm.
do you make sure that you have your notes down or like your little ideas? How does that look for you?
Oh. So one trick I discovered was using Gmail Draft.
Oh,
It's like, yeah, I know, right? So it's my go-to. So whenever I have an idea, I'll go to my Gmail drafts, and there'll be like a subject line like I'm researching about the Imjin War right now. So it's like Imjin War in bold, and then whatever I find, like I'll put links down, or I'll like copy and paste like chunks of paragraphs. So I could, access on my phone, but easily on my computer. So I highly recommend Gmail drafts or Hotmail
oh,
drafts.
I see. Because it's not
Yeah,
necessarily taking up space on your phone, right? Yeah.
exactly. And it saves
Okay.
everything securely.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, great. A wonderful hack for Gmail. I love it. The kids can probably benefit from that as well.
Yeah.
So when teenagers, we've talked about this a little bit already, when they hear the
Hmm.
word research, they think about essays and projects for school. Um, Maybe having young June in mind, but then I know that you're also a mother.
Hmm.
How do you think teenagers could maybe shift their relationship with and their perspective on research?
Hmm. So I I always wish now, as I'm in my like 30s, I wish I could tell June to look into Korean history when I was a teenager, because I remember just not being interested at all. And so like I think if I share this story, like I'm hoping that it might inspire a few students to look at research differently, which is like I think when we think of research and like history, it seems like it doesn't it feels like a chore, like it's not very relevant to us because we're thinking like, oh, it's like about dead people. Like, why does history matter? Like, why do I need to like dig into it? Why am I wasting time on this? But for me, when I started learning, researching into Korean history, it almost felt like I was looking at a mirror because before I knew about Korean history, I almost felt like this lone island floating in the middle of the sea. And, all these family values I had, I was just like, it's just uniquely my family. And I'm Canadian, but I'm also Korean. And so I was like in this in-between world, and I didn't really feel Canadian. I didn't really feel Korean. I was just like kind of floating randomly. And so I just felt very random. I'm like, I don't know why I believe the things I do. I don't know why I have the values that I have. Um, and I don't know why my parents are the way they are. But the more I studied history, it almost felt like it it made me realize that so much of who we are, so many of the values we have, so many of our struggles is very deeply rooted in our historical past. And so it doesn't even have to be our own like cultural history. I think when we study about the history of people in general, we start to realize that like there's so many things like I could read the Diary of Anne Frank and like it resonates with me. And
Mhm.
it just shows you that no matter where people live, what time period people live, they're still human beings and human nature has not really changed over the course of hundreds and thousands of years. And I think the more we learn about history, you almost start to see a pattern. So I almost like to say knowing history gives you this cool, like prophetic intelligence because you see patterns. And when I'm looking at the news now, like as someone who knows history, you're just like, oh my gosh, like you see history repeating. Um, and you are able to pick up on the lessons and warnings history has taught us over centuries and centuries. And so, yeah, I think history is a cool superpower to have. And I also think approaching history when we think of research, it can sound very boring, but I'd say approach history as like an investigator. Like think of yourself as a detective,
Mm,
and if there's like this thesis or like this crime scene, think of it thesis like a crime scene. Like you're trying to find an answer to whatever you're researching, like have the mind of like an investigator. And that's why all my novels actually have mystery because I see history as a mystery. It's like a world we don't understand, but the truth is somewhere there, like waiting for you to uncover. And so that's why research is so fun because it's like you're trying to the answer is there. You just have to find it. And I think that's the fun of it because it's like it's there. The truth is there. Like, when you watch like crime shows, the detectives will always say the truth is right in front of you. You just have to like see it and find
mhm.
it. And so I think that's the fun of research for me personally.
Yeah, I think our history teachers are going to love what you just said. Our we have many courses. We have like world history, European history, U.S. history, etc. And yeah, I the framing of history as an investigation, looking into a
Hmm.
historic event like an investigator. I love that lens a lot because I don't know, it kind of makes you feel important too. Like you're
Yes.
significant to
It's
the
like your
retelling of
case.
history.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's your case.
exactly.
I love that so much, especially because so my mother, she's from Jeju Island, and so
Oh my God,
looking into
that's
that
amazing.
history over the
Yeah.
past several years, it all started with
Hmm.
the book The Island of Sea Women by
Yes,
Lisa
I've heard of
C.
that.
And
Yeah,
so when I read that, I was like, wait a second, this happened? And so
yeah.
I also went on this kind of investigative season of my life where I was learning so much about my mother and her family and the
Hmm.
island where she grew up on and the really significant events that helped me understand my mom a lot better.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
realizing, oh, she's an islander. She's not a mainlander. That's a
Yeah.
significant difference.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I love,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
I'm an investigator. I'm going to claim it, June. I'm an
Yes, let's
investigator.
claim it.
Yeah. I love that. So on that note, we're kind of touching on it already, but what do you feel like, and share as much as you're comfortable with, what do you feel
Hmm.
like research has helped you discover about yourself?
Hmm. I discovered, like, I think. I when I was growing up, I never felt like I really belonged anywhere. Like I didn't feel like I shared earlier, like I didn't feel like I was Canadian enough. I couldn't really fit in with like the people who I felt like were very Canadian. And then when I went to Korea, like I couldn't really speak Korean, so I didn't feel Korean enough. But I think the more I researched into my heritage, I realized like there's so many values that define me that are very um shaped by like for example, Korea is very steeped in Confucianism and I realized, oh, there's like a lot of things, values and views that I have that are very steeped in Confucianism as well. And so I found that fascinating. So it's like the more I learn, it's more like I'm learning more about myself.
Mhm.
And what else? And I think, oh, my brain started to blank.
Oh
But
no,
yeah,
you're
something that I think it's not only um, researching about history, but also retelling history
mhm.
in my own way. That helps me reclaim my Korean roots. Because I think when we think of heritage, I think it has to look a certain way. But as I'm retelling Korea's past and I'm giving myself the permission to write about Korea's past, even though sometimes I feel like I don't have it, but I just tell it anyways. And initially, I was really scared. I'd be like, oh, am I Korean enough to write about Korean history? And when I published my second book, I remember like I just felt so insecure about my retelling of Korea's past. And I remember calling my mom on the phone. I'm like, I'm not Korean enough. And I was like
Oh.
crying. But she told me, you know what, like June, when, second gen Koreans speaking Korean, um, they speak with an accent, but she's like, accents are beautiful. Accents tell a story. And I realized that just because my research and retelling of Korea's past is different, it doesn't mean that that different is bad. It just offers a more unique perspective. And so, yeah, I think like when we're researching, I learned it's important to like not think of it like as like this cold clinical investigation, but just like you could bring your own personal touch and your unique voice into reimagining the past. Because I think no matter how objective we try to be about history, like we'll still like a part of ourselves will still go into it. And I think that's okay. And I think that's beautiful to tell history through our own personal kind of with our own personal flavor or our own personal lens.
Hmm. And I mean, even outside of your work, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of authors who've been doing the same thing and looking into histories of countries or cultures that aren't their own whatsoever.
Exactly. But we're
So,
so harsh on ourselves.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I like you used a couple words like the retelling of history and reimagining. Uh, and juxtaposing that with like not having this cold clinical view of history.
Hmm.
I think that is probably really significant for anyone, but especially students to consider when they're looking into history and they're doing their research. um, there's there's like treasure there, and there's something
Yes.
there that can potentially inspire you in some creative capacity.
Hmm.
um, Before we wrap up, I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit. I'm wondering if you have an exercise that students could try, like a little research
Hmm.
creativity
Hmm.
exercise, maybe based off of something you've done.
Okay. Um, so I always like to say, history should be treated as like a main character in a novel. So, because a lot of times when we think of history, we think, oh yeah, you need to like history dump that. It's like the boring stuff. You need to like dump it out, like, and just get it over with as fast as possible. It's like think of history as a character. And so one exercise I like to do is let's say pick a specific like historical event, like and a place, and imagine you step into that place. Try to make like what is the first thing you notice, and then slowly try looking around and what are other details that stand out to you. Because I think it's the little details that really brings history alive. And I think even with research, it's not the big like the dates and the big major like historical characters. It's like the little details that I feel like makes a research paper so much more like fleshed out. So yeah, I guess, all right, not maybe step into the room, but maybe like if it's an event or a historical figure, like find the smallest detail that just like that, yeah, stands out. Because I remember listening to an interview by Min Jin Lee, and she also says historical fiction is thrives on those little details, and I think it goes the same with probably research papers as well. So yeah, like find the small details, the f small unique details that you think other people might not know about. So that would be my exercise.
I love that. It makes me think about food for some reason.
Yes.
Like what food shows up in history.
Flavor. Yeah.
Yeah, for example, I'm assuming you've seen K-pop Demon Hunters. I don't want to,
Yes, I have.
okay. But one of the big things there are the little details about
Hmm.
food throughout the movie. And so that's what comes to mind for me. Like if I enter this period of history and I look at an event, something small like that. I love that you said it's not just about the event; it's about the little like again
Yes.
going back to that analogy of a crime scene, looking for little
Yeah,
fingerprints
the
of other
details. Yeah.
things. Yeah, yeah. Well, June, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on the connection between creativity and research.
Thank you for having me.